So then,
So like if
on average,
someone really, really, really wants to eat chocolate ice cream, then it's more immoral to not give them chocolate ice cream because like the most important thing in the world to them or whatever. So where if someone just doesn't really care, then it's not really that immoral to not give them chocolate ice cream. It's less immoral.
okay. Okay. Well, what if somebody
Like it's pretty obvious. Like
has a
if you don't care about something, then not receiving that thing would not be immoral, right?
I guess nah. I might disagree, but not in your framework. No, I guess not. Yeah. Um, but so what if what if somebody like only like kind of is kind of against their will being imposed upon, but somebody else really wants to impose on their will? Is it is it more?
It would be more moral to help the person. Like there would be more moral actions in helping the person to impose. There would still be a level of immorality, but the net amount of morality would be greater. Because if like you're helping one person or hurting another, you're doing one moral action, one immoral action. And if the amount you're helping the other person is greater than the amount you're hurting the other person, then the amount of morality is greater than the amount of immorality, but they don't cancel out. So you're still doing an immoral action.
Okay, so you're still doing an immoral action.
Yep.
Well, so there's still some immorality taking place, but it's a net positive.
Sure.
Okay.
So like
So,
trolley problem, you can kill one, save five. One immoral action, five moral actions, net positive.
I mean, yeah, it depends on how you define it, because you could also just say that like any action that has a net positive morality is just entirely good.
Right, that I think is
And like
wrong. That model I think is inherently wrong. That's
really
utilitarianism.
wrong.
Yeah,
Okay.
because that model entails that you can justify any horrible action as being literally the moral action as long as the consequences are net positive, which I think is inherently wrong and one of the impetuses for my model.
So what can you can you give an example of like an action that would have net positive
Killing one to save five,
outcomes?
trolley problem. So killing one person to save five people. If it is the case that morality is dependent on the positive outcome, then it is literally moral to kill the one person. I think it is never moral to kill the one person, even though it's justified. It is still immoral to kill the one person, and you should still feel guilt and remorse and try to, I don't know, appease or what is make up for the fact that you've done an immoral action by killing the one to save the five.
Hmm.
Prison is
Okay.
another good example. Putting people in prison, it is not moral to put people in prison. It's pragmatically justified because you're saving their victims, but it's still immoral to put people in prison, and you should try
Yeah.
to help cure them, not punish them. It's not good to punish them, it's necessary.
Right. So so let's say, and right now this is I'm more so just joking. I'm just messing around. But let's say that the entirety of planet Earth, 8 billion people. Like generally most people don't want to die, but there's a limit, I guess, to that desire. Let's say there was like one guy though, and he just like really badly wanted everybody to die, and so he was trying to make a super bomb to blow up the planet Earth. Would we be immoral to stop him if his desire to wipe out all life on Earth was like just
Sure.
greater
Well, no, so the
maximally?
amount of the desire wouldn't make a difference there. So like hypothetically, this isn't the
I
best
thought
of
you
all
said I thought
possible.
you said that the amount of desire made
Well, no, it's
is what made the
if he has any desire to do something and it's within his rights, it's immoral to stop him. So it doesn't matter. The amount of desire wouldn't make it not immoral. It would still be immoral. So say he has like a tiny desire to do something that he has the right to do, it would be immoral to stop him.
yeah, it would
Uh,
be immoral, but like I mean, if we go back to like the example of like two people,
yep,
one guy has like five strong desires, the other guy has 10,000 strong desires, and
yep.
each of their desires are each individual desire is infinite is equal in strength, but one just has more of them. You would say that it'd be more immoral to kill the guy that
Right,
has the larger number of desires.
right.
Okay, well let's say like
Well, you just asked,
two
would
people
it
both
be
have
immoral? And so the question, would it be
what
immoral, is a binary of is there any amount of immorality? The amount of desire there wouldn't make a difference. So if you're asking a comparative question, would it be more moral to help the individual blow up the planet than it would be immoral to than immoral actions done by killing people? If Like literally everyone on the planet like barely cared if they survived or not. Like little to no caring. And the one guy really had the really strong will to blow everyone up or something. Then yes, you could hypothetically have it such that the amount of will benefited would outweigh the amount of will imposed upon somehow. I don't know how you would do that, but hypothetically, in which case, yes, it would be there would be a net moral action done by helping people blow up the planet, as long as people barely cared if they lived.
I mean, I don't know what you mean. What you would say is barely. It's like
Well, it's just a comparative number to say that it's less than the amount of people wanting to blow up the planet or something. Again, this is not possible in the best of all possible worlds because you can't impose on other people's wills. But hypothetically,
well, yeah, of course.
yeah,
But yeah,
I
just like
don't.
in
Also, it's
a
also it's
world
like that's not really
similar to ours.
possible. Like I don't see how it would be possible for one person's to have some kind of cognitive ability to will something to a greater extent to
He has a really
overrule.
big brain.
I don't see how that
He has
would
a lot. He
happen.
has a lot of capacity for desire. He's
Don't see
just
how that
like
would possible. But again, that would
big
just be
Jacob
like
brains.
eating a person turning into a pretzel for all eternity. Just a thing that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Of course, it probably wouldn't happen. I mean, but what if it did? No, I'm kidding. Um, yeah, no, I'm just messing around.
But still immoral. So it
But okay,
still
so
wouldn't be possible in the best of all possible worlds.
yeah, so okay, so then what exactly is? Because again, like obviously, yeah, I can agree with you. Like two things are both immoral, but it's like surely you recognize that one action can be more immoral than another.
Sure.
In positions of will with the same number of entities, like one man, another man, same number of entities. What would make imposing imposing on the will of one more immoral than imposing on the will of another? Is it like the strength of the desire? Just the strength of desire? Is it the number of desires? Or is it a combination of both? Like what specifically
Yeah,
would
this
make?
be the combination of the strength and number of the desires. So like obviously the number of desires, if you have zero strength, is still zero. But this is not
Right.
really interesting question at all.
Well, okay. Well. I mean,
I'm
the reason I
bored. I want to move
asked.
on. Talon, what do you got?
All right.
Talon Strong. Is he? Let me know if he's speaking and I can't hear him.
Oh, I can speak, but Talon, you can go first.
Or yeah, AP, you can go because I can't hear Talon at all.
You can't hear Talon?
Nope. All right, so I'll refresh one sec.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right,
I think it's his mic bugging.
Talon, can you say something just to test if I can hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, go for it.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm a theist. So I wanted to debate you on theism versus atheism.
Okay. Like a formal debate on my channel is $75, or otherwise you can just ask a question. Go ahead, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have $75.
Get a job.
Okay, so Tjump, I think that we got off on the wrong foot in our prior conversation, but I think that there was a response I wanted to make specifically to your arguments relating to novel testament predictions. Do you want me to line the argument real quick?
Sure.
The first thing I was going to ask you pretty much is basically if you believe that we ought to be like a Platonist or a physicalist prior to making these novel testament predictions.
No.
Okay, so if it is the case that these metaphysical theories are basically not necessary in the process of the scientific model, then how does it follow from these metaphysical theories that they are more probable in virtue of these scientific models?
Well, it doesn't make sense because nothing's necessary to be the case. Like all models are possibilities by definition. And so of the possibilities, the ones that can predict the future are the ones you should accept. There's no necessarily you should accept one. No.
Okay, so my argument wasn't basically that scientific models are necessarily correct. I am saying to you that if it is a case that the metaphysical theories, like for example, Platonism or nominalism or physicalism, are not relevant in the virtue or in respects of analyzing which scientific theory is the best exponent for exponendums,
Well, wait,
then
that
how would
doesn't
it
make
be the
sense.
case
That
that
literally doesn't make sense. So,
simply wait? I was just gonna say,
well, what you're
how is it going to
saying
be the
doesn't make
case that
sense. There's too much gibberish in there. If I have a hypothesis and the hypothesis makes a prediction and the prediction happens,
okay,
it is now entailed that that is evidence of the hypothesis. Period. So it seems like
Okay,
what you're
so
saying
you
is that
say,
it is not necessarily the case that this one hypothesis excludes all other alternatives, which is irrelevant. We don't care about that. Underdetermination, irrelevant.
well, I don't see how the metaphysical theory is making any prediction. All you're saying is that, well, because of physicalism, then we can make predictions regarding tectonic plates or, for example, law of gravity. For one, I'd like to place the question whether it is actually this metaphysical theory which is making these novel testable predictions,
Well, the
or
predictions
rather,
are in a brain.
the
It's a
question just
brain.
refers to this specifically.
It's a brain. So if I make a prediction, if I use a model to make a prediction, the model is making the prediction.
Uh-huh.
That's all you need. There's no other data.
Oh, okay. So I'll just respond by saying, are you finished or no?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I was just saying to you that, I mean, these theories that we're talking about with respect to Platonism, physicalism, nominalism, these are all metaphysical theories. So
Doesn't
I was
matter.
going to say that automatically they wouldn't be applicable or even relevant to the scientific analysis of certain theories or
That's
analyzing
again
predictions regarding the
irrelevant
empirical
nonsense,
world.
irrelevant nonsense. I can make any theory I want. God
How is it
exists.
irrelevant nonsense?
I can make any theory I want. God exists. Naturalism is true. Magical potatoes exist. If I make predictions, those predictions are true. It's evidence of everything in my hypothesis, no matter what I include. I include anything I want.
Okay, so my last response on this specific point is going to be, well, if it is the case that, and please, I would really appreciate if you don't interrupt me. I'm just going to make this last point before I ask you something else. If it is the case that these physical theories are logically necessary for the building or the
That doesn't make
construction of these
sense.
scientific
That doesn't make
models,
sense. Like
then
I don't.
simply,
It does
so
not make
wait,
sense.
just
What you're saying does not make sense. It does not track with
okay. I'll
anything I
just
said.
paraphrase it. Okay.
Okay. Like there's no necessary. There's no necessary involved in anything I've said or
Yeah, I'll
anything
try
I've
to
said.
make it make sense.
So
Okay.
no necessary. Get rid of necessary. Get rid of the word necessary.
Okay. Okay. So I was gonna say this. I'll just put it in a different way for it to make sense. Okay. So I was just gonna say this, right? Which is basically, if the scientific models are basically obviously constructed based on accessible predictions, right?
Sure.
And for example, being a Platonist or being a nominalist or being a physicalist is not required for us to build these scientific models, then using these scientific models to establish probability of these metaphysical theories is going to be a non sequitur in the
No,
sense
I've
where
already
these
debunked
metaphysical theories
this.
has no
I've already debunked
relevancy
this.
to
What your
scientific
argument
models.
is that you want a piece of evidence that exclusively indicates physicalism over idealism. This is dumb. This is called underdetermination. Any piece of evidence you have can be explained by infinitely many hypotheses. We do not care. What matters is which one predicted it
Wait,
first.
don't you think the scientific problem?
What
Yeah, I was
matters,
going to ask you this then.
well, what
Don't you
matters
think the
is
scientific
whichever one
problem of
predicted them first.
underdetermination can be solved?
No,
Hello?
no, it can't be solved. It doesn't make any sense. There's no evidence that
Oh,
it's
so you think it is
exclusively-
logically impossible?
Sort of, yes.
Okay, so what's the logical contradiction in basically demonstrating a view to be more epistemologically warranted than another view
Wait.
to solve the problem of
So
underdetermination?
the problem of underdetermination is that any piece of evidence can be explained by infinitely many hypotheses. Like, for example, I can say the entire universe was created by magical farting pixies 5 minutes ago, and we all have the memories that the magical
Mhm.
farting pixies implanted in us. There is no way to prove that wrong with some piece of evidence we find. Any piece of evidence
Mhm.
we find can be explained by
Mhm.
magical farting pixies 5 minutes ago. So I don't. Yes, that's there's no way to
Yeah,
solve
so
that
with all due
problem.
respect, Sir Tjump, go ahead.
Well, there's no way to solve that problem.
So with all due respect, Sir Tjump, I was going to basically say that when I asked you if it is logically impossible for this problem to be solved, your response is that it is sort of the case. So then I asked you what is a logical contradiction, and when I asked for the logical contradiction, you then went ahead and gave me the definition of the scientific problem of underdetermination, which I already understand perfectly.
Right.
And then you then said that there's no means of solving this problem. But I think that what if, for example, we understand like there are theoretical virtues and explanatory virtues that exist, right? Like, for example, your
Well, none of those solve the
unification,
problem.
your
None of
parsimony, your
those solve the
simplicity.
problem.
Yes. So why can't we just appeal to these virtues to like
None
basically
of them
solve
solve
like
the
the
problem. They aren't a solution to anything.
So you don't think like probability theories can be appealed to like basically raise the probability of a particular view of the other?
Well, you can. They just don't work. They're not used because they don't differentiate imagination from reality. Like you can try. They just don't work.
So wait a second. So when you subscribe to the belief, like for example, that physicalism is true or atheism is true, you grant that theism is just as justified as atheism or theism
No,
or atheism,
no, no,
right?
no. Again, because underdetermination isn't a justification. Novel predictions are. The ones that make novel predictions are justified. The ones that don't are unjustified. With whatever virtues you want, still unjustified. The fact that they can explain the other data,
Well, yeah,
unjustified.
but the thing is, the novel testable predictions are just the empirical observations we have, and then we basically, as
Well,
scientists would
that's
do, or
not just that's
metaphysicians would
evidence.
do.
That's real evidence. So all the principles that you list, the whatever the virtues and things, all garbage. They're nothing. They're garbage, waste of time. The ability to predict the future,
Well,
that's
it's going to
gold.
depend, right? Because
No, it doesn't. It doesn't
yeah.
depend. It doesn't depend. They're all garbage. They're all just throw them away. They're garbage. The only thing that
Hmm.
matters is can you predict the future? Then it's justified. If you can't, not justified.
Okay. It seems as if you're like an empiricist when it comes to like justification, because like another
Nope.
person can respond by saying that they take conceptual justification as evidence.
Okay, there
And
you
if you
go.
grant that, like for example, all the empirical observations we have are going to be contingent on certain transcendental categories or conceptual schemes, which gives these
Doesn't make a difference.
observations
Irrelevant. Irrelevant.
intelligibility,
Irrelevant.
then how is it going to be the case that these conceptual ideas, which grounds these empirical observations or make them intelligible, is unnecessary or irrelevant or is not in form of probability
This is
raising
the philosophy of
justification at
science. The
all?
reason we've already debunked all of that garbage is because none of it works. None of it works in reality. Predictions work.
Okay, so
Predictions
let me just put it in a
describe
different way
reality.
then. Okay, I'll just put it in a different way then. Okay, so I was just gonna say that with respect to the novel testable predictions, it appears as if the novel testable predictions are just merely the empirical observations we
No. Again,
experience
this is
as a
you keep
means of
misunderstanding.
basically, yeah, about the world.
No,
Yeah.
you keep not understanding. Novel predictions work. Virtues don't work. Novel predictions take us to the moon. They give science. They give technology. They expand the life. They work. Virtues give us nothing. They do not work. They make no progress ever in reality for anything. They're
Yeah,
useless.
that's just a pragmatist account of epistemology. Why
And
should I
that's
accept
how
that?
we establish which ones are better than the other ones. Ones that work are better than ones that don't work. Yes.
Yeah, so you're just saying that, okay, so again, this is a pragmatist account of epistemology, right? And
Yes, it
besides,
works.
the
So
novel
this
testable
is how we
predictions are
define why virtues are garbage. They don't work to do anything. Predictions work to do
okay.
things.
So the thing
So
is, the virtue, the novel testable
if
prediction.
virtues were better than predictions, then we would grant that they are a better way to justify beliefs. They don't work.
But wouldn't the novel testable prediction be a part of predictive power success, which is an
No,
explanatory virtues of
predictive
theories?
power is just the ability to explain things that we see. Everything has infinite predictive power.
But
Magical farting pixies has infinite predictive power. That predictive power is garbage. We don't care. Irrelevant.
well, predictive power is in alignment with predictive success. It basically measures the
We
power
don't
of a
care
theory to
about
predict the
any of that.
future
All of that
or
is
to make predictions
garbage.
about the experimental world.
No, it has nothing to do with the future. Experimental power is the ability to predict past data. Future data is something different. So experimental or explanatory power is the ability to explain the data we have, past tense. Irrelevant. We don't care about that. Go away. Magical farting pixies have
You're
infinite
kind of
explanatory
bugging a
power.
little bit.
What?
You're kind of bugging a little bit. Is it just
Bugging?
me or?
Like
Yeah.
see my
No,
chat.
you're better now. You're better now.
My
Go ahead,
chat
continue.
seems to be working fine. But yeah, so explanatory power is garbage. It's the ability to explain the past data that we have. Explanatory power is literally the ability to explain the current data set. That's all it means. We don't care about that.
Okay.
Magical
Yeah,
farting
so the thing
pixies
is that
have infinite
mhm.
explanatory power. It's irrelevant.
Okay, so I think that these things would be relevant when it comes to metaphysical theories, but I mean,
No,
I was just gonna
the
basically
level
pose
of
the
the
question,
theory
which
doesn't
is,
make a difference. Level of the theory makes no difference.
you don't think something being a better explanation makes it a more likely explanation?
Well, your principles don't make something a better explanation. Explanatory power doesn't make something a better
Okay, so
explanation.
think of it like this. So would you grant parsimony to be like something
No.
which raises the justification of view?
Nope. 0%.
Hello?
No, it does not at all raise the
Okay,
level of
so what if I just justify Occam's razor in virtue of Bayesian probability?
all garbage. I don't care about any of that. So let's say we have a theory that
Okay,
is
so wait.
well. Let's say we
Okay,
have
so
a
you're
super
familiar with the
wait.
okay,
So,
so
so
you're familiar with like the
let's
principle of
say we have
indifference, right?
a theory that is super complicated. The opposite of Occam's razor. Lots of extra entities, whatever. Magical farting pixies, Bob the uncreated unicorn being, all of those things. But it predicts the future. It wins.
Mm-hmm.
100%. Doesn't it can be the least parsimonious thing possible, and you can have a super parsimonious theory. The one that makes predictions wins
Mm-hmm.
every time. 100%.
Okay, so let's say we have two theories then. Let's say we have two theories, right? One doesn't make any predictions, or no, sorry, neither of them makes any form of predictions regarding the
Then they're
experimental
both
world, but one is
garbage.
more parsimonious than the
Then
other.
they're both
Would you not
garbage.
grant the one which is more
Nope.
parsimonious to be the more epistemically justified
Nope.
theory?
Both garbage. Throw them away. Completely
Okay, so what's your view on the principle of indifference in Bayesian probability?
Bayesian probability has tons of problems. I'm not a fan of Bayesian probability. It only applies to things that have an empirical basis, like dice rolling or whatever. Has no basis on things like metaphysics.
Okay, so wait a second. So you're saying that things which are empirical are, sorry, because it is only empirically related, then that means it is irrelevant or it's garbage when it comes to metaphysical discourses. So then why would you appeal to novel testable
I
predictions?
didn't say any of that at all. So I said Bayesian epistemology can only be used
Uh-huh.
to justify things that have an empirical basis. Bayesian epistemology cannot be used for anything else. Completely useless in the case of
So
metaphysics.
so let's focus on the principle of indifference, which is what I'm postulating, right? What's your issue with that?
For what? What's the argument?
The principle of indifference
No. Like,
says that
what do you think the what are you using the principle indifference to do?
is to basically demonstrate why Occam's razor is basically something which can raise the probability of a theory.
It's wrong. I don't care.
Okay, so do you want me to explain the correlation, or do you not want me to explain the correlation?
I don't care. I know the principle of indifference. I don't care. If it doesn't make predictions, I don't care.
So wait a second. So basically your whole entire epistemology is just entirely dependent and parasitic on predictive. I guess you could
Yeah, if
say
you could predict the
predictive
future,
success
you
or
have
something's
evidence.
ability to predict the
Yep.
experimental
Yep.
world.
Yep, anything. So if you have
Okay,
magical pixie leprechauns farting in the wind and you can predict the future, you have more evidence than every model that can't predict the future.
so wait a second. So let's get this clear. So you're just saying that predictive power, or what's the argument for predictive success or predictive? I guess you could say predictive. Predictive
Our
success.
ability
Sorry,
to predict
being
the
the only
future.
justificator metric, the only valid
Our
one.
imagination is bad at predicting the future. So if you have a model that can predict the future, it's more likely to correspond to reality than our imagination.
When you make the affirmation that our imagination is bad at predicting the future, how do you justify that belief?
Because we try to imagine things and it's wrong more often than it's right.
So is that justification based on predictive success?
No, it's based off our experience. It's just a fact of the matter.
So wait a second. So justification isn't just confined to the realm of predictive success.
Well, no, that's experience. We literally experience imagining things and then failing. So it's not a prediction. It's literally something we
Okay.
experience.
So
Direct
I'm trying to
experience,
basically.
like we don't need to predict things to learn literally anything. We predict things to learn things about the external world. Conceptual truths about our mind and our experience do not need to have predictions to believe them. So if I say
Yeah,
I'm
obviously there's going
imagining
to
a
be a
unicorn,
difference between yeah. I grant the difference between like the demarcation between like conceptual a priori justification and a posteriori justification. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm saying that when I asked you for your metric for justification as a whole universally when it comes to your
my
belief system,
apologies. I was using
you said
justification specifically for external things, not justification in general for all things. So justification for all possible things would be my model of
mhm.
epistemology, which is conceptual claims require conceptual evidence, empirical claims require empirical evidence, metaphysical claims require metaphysical evidence. That's like my universal
Conceptual claims like,
justification.
for example, A equals A.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically your justification or you could say, your justificatory system acts in alignment with not only these conceptual claims, but these empirical observations plus novel testable predictions, correct?
Right. Novel testable predictions is only relevant to like the empirical metaphysical part, not the conceptual part.
Okay. So if the novel testable predictions are basically going to be contingent on experiences regarding the empirical world, how does it extend to something which is metaphysical?
So novel testable predictions are anything that can predict the future has evidence. So if your hypothesis is there's a metaphysical being named Bob and you predict the future, that's evidence of metaphysics.
Okay, so you're saying that it is evidence. When you say evidence, what do you mean in this context by evidence?
Something that increases the probability of it being true.
Okay, so I like the argument as to why novel testable predictions raises the probability of metaphysical theories.
What was the question?
Yeah, what's the argument for the idea that novel testable predictions raises the probability of metaphysical theories?
Our ability to imagine things is bad and normally doesn't correspond to reality, which is metaphysics is reality. If it can predict the future, it's more likely to correspond to reality than our imagination.
Well, isn't that just based on induction?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so how do you argue that induction is probability raising?
Our ability to imagine things doesn't normally correspond to reality. So if something does more
Isn't
than our
that just like an
imagination,
inductive appeal though? Cause
that's
like,
fine. That's fine. Doesn't make a difference.
okay, so your argument for induction is induction, correct?
No, I'm not using induction to argue for induction. I'm using an experience, a fact of the reality, to then use to determine which of the things we're using is more likely to correspond to reality. So I'm not
Mhm.
using
So
induction
when
to
I
justify
when I
induction.
scrutinized your worldview, and I asked you how do you argue induction is more likely, you said
Well, no.
basically
I don't
our induction
induction.
is probability
I
reason.
don't argue induction is more likely. Induction is a fact. There is a fact.
Induction
Things
is
happen.
no
Things happen at a certain rate. Some of them happen more. Some of them happen
wait.
less.
Hmm.
That's a fact.
Yeah, so I don't take induction to be a fact. I take it to be an epistemological methodology, which is different from a
What do
fact,
you
which
mean it's not a
describes the
fact? So, like,
experimental world.
when I imagine things, lots of them don't happen, right? That's a fact.
Okay, so when you say the
Is
majority of
it
things that we
is
imagine
this a
tends to not be
fact
a
or not?
fact,
Is it a fact or not that I have lots of imaginary things?
I guess.
Right. And so if I wanted to predict like what's going to happen next or whatever, my imagination is pretty bad at this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but sometimes I can do it,
Yeah.
very rarely. And there are certain models that do it a lot better than mine, my imagination, right? Like theory of
Mm-hmm.
gravity is much better at doing this than mine.
Yeah, so you're saying that your imagination has terrible predictive success, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a
Yeah,
fact.
so then I'm
I'm not
saying,
arguing.
okay,
I'm not
go ahead.
arguing that this justifies induction. I'm saying this is a fact. This happens.
Mm-hmm. So then, well, I was asking you a different question, but I mean, I grant that part definitely. Obviously, our imaginations are bad at predicting what
Sure.
is true of reality, or making yeah. So I'm
So
basically saying that
something else.
like,
So
if it
something
is a case
else.
that you're
Wait. So the question is,
yeah,
we both agree that our imagination is bad at doing this, and if we have something else that's
uh-huh,
good at
yeah,
doing this, is it more likely that that thing corresponds to reality than our imagination? That's the question.
then just our imaginations, yeah, sure, but our imagination isn't the
That's
only thing
the
we
whole
appeal to
argument.
generally.
That is the whole argument. It's literally it.
Yeah, but the thing is that the reason as to why the argument would land is because you're then basically excluding all the things that we appeal to outside
No.
of our
I'm happy.
imagination
I'm
and
happy to grant
predictions
any
to
of those. So
justify claims.
if you have another method
Mm-hmm.
that can accurately tell us more information about reality and get it right than predictions, I'm happy to grant that. They just never been demonstrated in reality.
Yeah, so I was just basically saying to you that the thing about the arguments is that while at face value it might appear to be convincing, the issue is that you have the proclivity to, I guess, assume in the background that the things that we appeal to for beliefs is either going to be our mere imaginations or it's going to be novel testable predictions. But I don't think our evidential appeal is as black and white and as you perceive it to be.
Well,
I think
that's
there
great.
are
That's
other
great.
things
So
that we appeal
if you
to.
have other things and you can use them to give me more information in my model. So say you can use them to make better testable predictions and they work, then I'm happy to
Mm-hmm.
grant those, including the other information that they would entail. Now, because in my model, novel
Mm-hmm.
testable predictions is what works, and it's the only thing that works. That's the standard I'm going to go off of. And so you would need to beat my standard and do something better than what my standard could do in order to supplant that with something else. And so if you have some other model that
Yeah,
you
but
think
the
works,
issue here is that I fail to see. Yeah. So I grant the novel testable predictions in some sense being epistemically useful. What I don't grant is whether this epistemically useful tool has any relevancy to, for example, the predictions, or rather not predictions, but the truthiness of metaphysical theories. Like how exactly were physicalist theories
well,
in any way relevant
because all
to
of those things that you're
yeah
talking
novel testable
about are
predictions
your
of what the empirical
imagination.
world.
You haven't shown that
Excuse
any of
me.
your principles are any different than imagination. I have. Mine works. It shows it's now more than imagination. So everything starts at a level of imagination. Everything we imagine is imaginary by definition. And then we need some standard to move it
Okay.
above that. Is it more than imagination? Now I have a standard, novel testable
Mm-hmm.
predictions. This gives us a reason to believe that these things are more than our imagination. Now you would need another standard to show that
Mm-hmm.
your imaginary things are more than imaginary. And that's what you haven't provided. You just said,
Well.
hey,
Mm-hmm.
here's all of my imaginary stuff, which I think is imaginary and it's really nice imaginary stuff. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I already have a standard that's beyond imagination. You don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the issue here is this, right? So when you say principles, are you referring to like our conceptual truths, or like things that we accept to be true in our
Virtues.
conceptual, you could say,
Well, I'm
landscape?
arguing specifically about the things that you think that we should be including beyond testable predictions to try to determine what's true about reality. Those things specifically. I don't know what those are. The virtue stuff, explanatory power stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are the ones I'm
Mm-hmm.
specifically referring to when I'm talking about your imaginary
Okay.
stuff.
Okay, so hold on there a second. So when we talk about things like, for example, the laws of logic, would you think that like that is something which is relevant to our epistemology?
Yeah, it's just conceptual. It's conceptual truth. So it doesn't tell us anything about the fundamental nature of reality. It's just conceptual.
Okay, so it seems to be the case that, well, I mean, we've already established that your justification or your justificator system isn't just confined to novel testable
Well, I
predictions.
already
It's just something that you
granted that. That's
utilize for metaphysical
specifically
theories.
for things beyond our imagination. So
Hmm.
novel testable predictions is for things beyond our imagination. Things in our imagination,
Okay,
empirical evidence is perfectly fine. So I've already
yeah,
literally
and I'm saying that, yeah, so what is in question is basically, for one, how is it the case that physicalist models predicts the future if it is not about the empirical world?
what it is. It's novel testable predictions about the empirical world. What are you talking about?
No, no, physicalist models aren't just about it's aren't about empirical facts. It's about the metaphysical facts of the matter,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Which
fine.
is
That's
different.
both of those things are things beyond our imagination. So testable predictions apply to both empirical and metaphysical, both of which are outside of our imagination.
Wait, so let's just break this down real quick, and I want you to keep up with me, okay? So if it is the case that physicalist models are something which has a frame of reference, and the frame of reference is something which is a metaphysical state of affair,
Sure.
and novel testable predictions are things with respect to the empirical world, so the frame of reference is the empirical world or the empirical
What?
state of affair. How do you make the coextension between the metaphysical state of affair and the empirical state of affair in such a way whereas one has to be relevant to the other?
None of that matters. So like there's two things. There's our imagination and things outside of our imagination. There's you don't start with metaphysics, you don't start with empirical, all that's gibberish. There's imagination and things outside of our imagination. The category of things outside of our imagination includes all of metaphysics, all of the empirical world. The things in our imagination is the
Hmm.
conceptual stuff, the stuff that we language, logic, math, blah blah blah, stuff in our imagination. So if we want to go from the imaginary side to the beyond imaginary side, we need a principle, and that principle is novel testable predictions. So anything on the empirical metaphysical side is both justified by novel testable predictions. Metaphysics is the fundamental nature of reality.
So basically, I think that you're missing one thing, and I'll just exemplify it with this theory, this analogy, pretty much. So let's say, for example, like you're a transcendental realist, you believe that space-time is something is just experimental,
What?
and I'm like a
No,
transcendental
no,
idealist, right?
no.
So both of us like grant that we have empirical observations and there's certain empirical facts, like for example, causality exists, all of that bullcrap, right? Now, if we grant these facts, these empirical facts about the phenomenal world, right? How do these empirical facts, sorry, lead us to the metaphysical fact of the matter, which is whether transcendental realism is true or transcendental idealism is
If
true?
I have a
How do you make that
hypothesis,
extrapolation?
physicalism is true, and that hypothesis makes predictions, that is evidence physicalism is true. Period. It's very simple. It doesn't need to
Yeah,
entail
so
with
so
100% certainty. I don't
basically,
care.
I'm saying to you that let's just entertain. Okay, so could I just make a response real quick?
Sure.
Okay, sure. So I was just gonna say, well, in the analogy I've given specifically, right, we have these metaphysical theories, right? You're like a realist, I'm like an idealist, right? But we grant all the empirical facts that we're talking. We grant the novel testable predictions. We grant all of these empirical facts, right, that exist within the empirical world.
Okay.
All we don't grant is whether the empirical world is extramental or it's just a mere mental entity, right?
Okay.
So how do you hash out how do you hash out the metaphysical fact of the matter, which is whether it is extramental or mental, in
Which
virtue
model
of the
makes predictions
observations
and gets them
within
right?
this potentially mental instrumental
I've
world.
already answered this 50 times. Whichever model makes predictions and gets them right is the one that has the evidence. Physicalists make the model that makes predictions and gets them right. Idealists don't.
Hmm.
That's the answer. We have evidence, you
Hmm.
don't. It's that
So
simple.
I'll just make my response explicit instead of like dancing around the bush and asking you these questions. My explicit response to this is that basically the novel testable prediction argument would work if they share the same frame of reference. So the
Nope. Frame of
physicalist
references
model
do not
has
matter.
no
Do
regard.
not
Yeah,
matter.
the physicalist model has no regard into the empirical state of affairs rule.
Literally irrelevant. Again, you can make whatever frame of reference you want. If it makes predictions, it works. Ours do, yours don't. That's that simple. Done. Over. Game over. You lose.
Yeah, so I'll just say it like this, right? So if it is a case that the justification that we use for, like,
Justifications
let's
don't
say these
matter.
metaphysical
Irrelevant. Make
theories,
predictions or don't go home.
yeah, but the prediction that you're talking about it assumes in the background that the frame of reference is analogous, but it is not.
Nope. It does not assume that at all. The only entailments here are that we have an imagination. Our imagination is bad at predicting the future. If we have something that's good at predicting the future,
Uh-huh.
then it's more likely that that thing corresponds to the thing outside our imagination. That's it.
So let's guess it. So let's get this clear, right? Let's say, for example, let's say I believe that it is true that there's a being named Bob which exists outside of space time,
Sure.
right? As you may say,
Yep.
right? And I think because of the fact that there's it could say a platonic world or a non-spatial temporal world, it is the case that like you could say I'm going to eat a chicken in the next hour. Let's say this occur, for example. If the metaphysical theory I have has no relevancy to whether I will eat chicken or whatever, right? Then
Well,
obviously it's going to be a red herring to
What
whether
would be
or
evidence?
to the justificatory process
It
of
would
whether I'll
be
eat the chicken in
perfect.
the
It would
next
be
hour.
evidence.
So the predictive
Nope.
status would be irrelevant.
Wrong. So first of all, chicken isn't a
Uh-huh.
novel prediction. So eating chicken is not a novel prediction. If you predicted something novel that we didn't know yet about the universe and got it right, that would be evidence of Bob. No entailment required. Does not matter if it was required that Bob exists to explain this thing. If it was novel, it would be
Okay, let me
evidence of
just
Bob.
entertain your argument then. So you're saying that in the case where you have Bob the Creator, right,
Yep.
and assuming that Bob the Creator exists outside of the space-time dimension,
Yep.
leads to, like, let's say, for example, we never knew, let's say up to this point in time,
Gold brick
you don't know
magically appears
whether,
in front of us.
yeah, let me just like give my argument real quick. I'm just gonna say that let's say, for example, both me and you never knew up until now, or up until the next 3 seconds that gravity exists, or there's something
just
which pulls
gold
objects
brick
towards it.
appears in front of us. This is a perfect example. If you predict,
Okay, let's use the
gold
gold
brick,
brick example.
yeah.
Then, okay, so with the gold brick example,
Yep.
let's say that we didn't know this, right? And
Yep.
I just assumed that because of the fact that Bob the Creator exists, or there's just some platonic world which exists beyond our
Yep.
sensor faculties. Let's say, assuming this, I say that because this is the case, the gold brick will appear in the next 3 seconds, correct?
Yep.
And this thing does in fact occur.
That is
yeah,
evidence.
so
You
wait a
have
second.
evidence of your platonic Bob.
Yeah, just let me just finish my arguments real quick on my response, okay? So I'm saying that if it is a case that, assuming this, I say that because this is the case, this thing follows. But we know that, for one, assuming that there's a platonic world, or that there's this immaterial entity which is called Bob, has no relevancy to whether something within the material world exists or will exist.
I don't care.
How do you make the
Stop,
connection?
stop. Nothing you said matters there. Nothing you said. If you have a hypothesis, Bob will create a gold brick appears, you have evidence of Bob. All this entailment bullshit does not make a difference. We don't care. That's underdetermination. Underdetermination is a problem solved in physics. We don't have a problem with it. We don't care.
Wait, so you agree that the argument or the evidence is logically invalid, correct?
No, it is perfectly valid. It doesn't need to be entailed.
Wait, so if it is logically valid, then how does it follow from
All right,
that?
so I've already addressed